What is the storyline for you, Dan? You know, you meet the stated 1.8 million target, but I remember a year ago, the first earnings call of the year in January 2023, Musk touting, well, we could do 2 million maybe. So what does the scorecard show, all told?
Hey, Ed and Carolyn, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I think the story of 2023 was that we were pulling back from a period of EV euphoria. And if we just contrast what's going on now versus where we were 2 years ago, where the market was fully supply constrained and demand was not at all concerned, that's not the case now. Now we have questions about demand, even so much to the point that Tesla acknowledged on the last earnings call that there were some macro concerns and it would not be producing as much as it could in its Austin and Berlin facilities simply because of some of these macro questions. And so the story going forward is, how do we deal with this period of some demand uncertainty within the EV market?
The storyline that we're leading on at Bloomberg is that Tesla's lost its crown to BYD. BYD, the sort of biggest standalone seller of battery electric vehicles. And we knew that was coming. Does it matter if Tesla is eclipsed by BYD, which is kind of predominantly focused on the domestic Chinese market?
It doesn't necessarily matter per se, in the sense that there is room for multiple players. And if we just break apart the markets, yes, BYD eclipsed Tesla this year. Within battery electric vehicles, Tesla still beat BYD. Tesla was at 1.8 million. I believe BYD on battery electrics was 1.6 million, something along those lines, with the remainder being plug-in hybrid vehicles. If you look at it on a regional basis, that's where the dynamics really vary, because in the US, Tesla is still the dominant EV name. In Europe, Tesla is still a top 3 or so player in the BEV market. China, Tesla is still, top 2 or 3. It's BYD that's really taken the crown, and it's China where we saw a lot of BYD sales accelerate. The other story that we saw emerging in 2023 was the rise of Chinese exports to Europe and to other markets. So yes, there's more competition from Tesla from BYD, but there is still room for Tesla to grow. It's just a question of, in the markets where Tesla's serving, where is the demand for that?
Yeah, and spin us then into 2024, when we're thinking of a BYD getting into Hungary and producing there, when we're thinking of two very different price points ultimately remain on top for Tesla in terms of profits and revenue because they make more expensive cars. Will Tesla ever want to go lower to be able to serve and get in on that highly competitive state that there is in China, or should it be staying in its lane?
Well, that's ultimately the goal for Tesla, right? That was something that they outlined at their Investor Day last March, the path to mega scale, right? 2024, from a volume perspective for Tesla, we're at 2 million units. That's below consensus of 2.2 million. So it is some growth. It's low double-digit growth versus 2023, but it is below, the long-term growth curve Tesla has laid out. And that's really because there's not much in the way of new incremental product for Tesla in 2024. Yes, there's Cybertruck, but we think that's niche. It's really Model 3 and Y, which are somewhat dated models. And so really the story for Tesla on volume growth going forward is going to be Model 2. Whenever that is released, we have that as, sometime in 2025, where they really go down to that lower price point. But there's a ways to go to get to that lower price point. They have to drive out a lot of cost to get there.
Let's just go back to the Cybertruck, because that was something that I'm sure frustrated you and many an analyst investor. Is they didn't strip out, give us the intricacies of how many they actually sold. Was it 500 on the low end? Was it 5,000 on the high end? Where do you think the Cybertruck is landing? And does it really matter if it's just getting people in to have a look at the other cars?
It was probably a small set of volumes. We modeled in something like 200 units. Possible it was below that number. Look, I think Tesla has been clear that there are a number of production challenges along the way that need to be met with Cybertruck, and so that's why, to us, yes, Cybertruck is a a different model for them, and it does help give some model diversification, which they've needed. That being said, we would set our expectations accordingly on Cybertruck. We're assuming that you're not going to get more than 20,000 units in 2024 because it is such a slow ramp. There are likely some questions as well on demand. We think that it will draw on some consumers who want more of a lifestyle type vehicle, but we don't see Cybertruck really penetrating that core large pickup market, which is used for work purposes and commercial purposes.
Dan, I want to go back to the demand question and zoom out. You can apply it to the legacy auto names, Ford and GM. You can bring in Rivian you want, but there is certainly a question now about the wave of first or early adopters being gone and how you just go after the everyday household. Tesla has used price cuts as its lever. The federal tax credit in this country is clearly a big factor. How do you model demand for this year?
Volume for the EV market will increase. Even for the legacy players where there are questions on demand and where clearly they are slowing the pace of volume, there is still going to be growth. From a subsidy standpoint in the U.S., one key step forward is that the $7,500 credit will now be made on a point of sale basis, meaning you get it immediately when you purchase the vehicle as opposed to when you're filing your taxes. So that can help. That being said, there are some vehicles losing eligibility. And as you note, there is clearly a question about going from the early adopters to the early majority, where now you have to deal with the questions of range anxiety and charging availability. And so these are all things that need to be addressed. So I think that there is clearly still path forward for EV volumes to be increasing in 2024. It's just that the pace of growth is slowing. The other piece of this, and you alluded to this on the point of the price cuts, Tesla can cut its price because its cost structure allows it to do so. For the legacy automakers, they've struggled with EVs on the cost front, and there's only so much that they can cut on price because the costs are what they are. So they have some work to do on the cost side so that they can sell more volumes at a more appropriate price point.